Hey everybody, this is Mike Worth, and I'm going to take you guys through right now just a simple way to get started making infographics by learning how to use the graph tool inside of Illustrator. Now, I'm just going to cover using the pie graph chart today just to get started, and then I'm going to show you a nice alternative way, as you see down here, to create something called a bubble chart. Now, these charts are used to represent percentages, which is probably one of the most common forms of data that infographic designers encounter. And let's get started here. Okay, so I've already got my tool palette open here, and I'm looking for this tool right here. And yours may have a bar graph in it, so if I pop this open, you'll see that these are all the kinds of charts that Illustrator can make. Now, they all serve different purposes and can illuminate data in all different ways, but we're going to start today with the pie graph tool. Okay, so once I have it selected, I can click and drag a box, and this is going to be the total area of my graph. And then once I do that, I get a very simple piece of information. It's just default, showing us the circle that will be the pie graph. And then we can enter in our values in this little table right here, which sort of looks like a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. Now, some advanced users may want to use this import data button, which lets you import comma separated value lists or a spreadsheet or anything that sort of shows stats. Okay, but we're going to do ours by hand, and we're going to just go with 3 percentages, and that will total to 100, because obviously if we're using percentages, that we want to have that at the heart. So what we'll say is we're going to say 70% of students love class. Okay, 20% of students like class, and then 10% of students absolutely hate class. Okay, so once I plug in those pieces of information, I can see them in the cells of the table. I'll click the go ahead and apply, and then now it will render out a not so beautiful but very accurate and functional pie graph. Okay, so this is great, right? I can now sort of go in and edit these by changing the colors, and I can add labels and all of those things. Now, I like to use the pie chart for just this reason, to just get accurate charts. Okay, I don't like many of its stylization features, so we're going to sort of talk about how we can get around that and really design these to make them more interesting, because frankly it's a pie chart, so we need to make it stand out in an infographic. Okay, so this looks great, and to start, and I have my spreadsheet window here. I'm just going to close that so I can sort of focus on design now. And what I can do is pull open my swatches palette, and with the white arrow, because this is a group, right? Right now the graph is still in editable mode, meaning I can go in and change the values, which I'll show you in a second. So if I deselect and then select on the Pac-Man side, the largest part of the graph, you can see it's got a fill of black and then a stroke of black. All right. Just for now, just so I can sort of get a basic color scheme going, I'm just going to look at this CMYK basic rainbow and assign that red. No particular reason other than it's the beginning of the rainbow, okay, and it's the largest value. So that's just what I do to get started, right? Nothing more. And I'm going to remove the stroke. Okay, then the second value, orange, and then I'll remove the stroke. And then the third value, okay, I'll remove the stroke first, and then I'll make it yellow. Okay, so there we go. Straight up, we have just a warm color paletted pie chart, okay, but there's no data on it, right? It's just sort of visualizing what we put into the table, which isn't very exciting because it doesn't tell us anything yet. So I'm just going to choose some type, and I always start with myriad just to sort of get information in. I always, when I'm working with clients, ask them for as finalized as possible data that we can plug in, just so we're not remaking charts again and again. So we're going to say here, students who love class. Okay, and I went all caps for readability. It's Myriad Pro Bold, and it is 11 point. Okay, this is fine. It's proportionate to my graph. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what's called internal labeling right now, and I'm just going to put that right inside of that large part of the chart. Right, and I'm going to do that for all of these. Okay, and we're going to encounter a design problem, so we'll talk about how to combat that. And right now, students who love class, great. But as you notice, we're getting a little bit of buzz, right? Whenever black sits on white, or on red, it always gets a little bit of an outline. All right, so I'm going to use white just so it has a great way to stand out. Cool. That's much better contrast with that. Okay, and then I'll Move this over, and that fits nicely in the space. And this was students who like class. Now notice I did a copy drag, which is you select the object, and then you hold the Option key with your pointer finger. You get that extra little arrow, and then you can click and drag, and then drop, and it makes an exact copy in a new location. I do this because of the type formatting. I don't want to recreate that stuff, because it opens up the possibility for me to mess up. So this one is students who hate class. Okay. All right, so we got really two design issues here. Right? As you can see, the type has some contrast issues. Right, against the yellow, it doesn't look as great as it should. Right, we want things to really pop because infographics are meant to be seen clearly. Okay, so this is a problem, and the type is really tight in the space. Right, that's two design issues that are going to hurt the way that information is perceived. All right. So what I can do is first and foremost is remember this was not the color scheme that I wanted. Okay, so I can come in and come up with a color scheme that's a little bit more friendly to perhaps using white type. Now notice I'm not saying, hey, let's change the type color, because if I were to change the type color, that creates a visual anomaly. Right? A visual anomaly is something that stands out from the consistency of other like items. And if it stands out, there's got to be a reason why. And in this case, it's not to be special, but it just solves a design problem, which in turn creates another design problem. Okay, because it's like, why is that type black and the rest white? So we're going to leave that white. Also, because I want all of this data, not the amounts, but the data to be considered equally. Right? These are different in terms of proportion, but I need all this stuff to be considered equally. So what I'll do is I'm going to come up with a new scheme. So I'm going to say, hate is going to be red, okay? And now I'm going to loosely use color psychology here, not for any sort of specific reason. Like, let's say like is sort of midway. Let's say that it is blue, okay? And then lastly, students who love class, well, maybe let's make that green. Okay, so now I have a RGB color scheme here, right? Which is good. It's primary colors, and it seems to have some connection to the color psychology. This would be effective. Okay. Now, if you're ever faced with branding colors in an infographic, well, you should really sort of consider that you want to have all your data to be accessed equally. Okay. So, but if you have to work with a client's color scheme, well, talk to them about that first, because that shouldn't always drive a color scheme inside of an infographic, because you might want to come up with a color system. But there might be alternatives, like perhaps using different tones or a monochromatic color scheme. Like if they have a royal purple, maybe you can do different tones to help delineate sections in a pie chart. Okay, but it's always about a conversation. Talk to the clients and tell them what works and what doesn't, because they may insist on their brand. All right. Now the other thing to consider is that the type is still tight in the space. If we want to use this idea of internal labeling, this has to work. So this is too tight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the chart. I'm going to scale it. I'm going to make it bigger. Now the reason why this is okay is because it's been rendered accurately. So if I scale it up, it's fine. It's still going to be proportionate to the percentages needed to be an effective pie chart. But we have a problem. The chart is still in what's called editable mode. So I can't scale it yet. So what I can do here, though, is if you go up to where it says Object, sorry you can't see this here, and then Graph. All right, so we're going to go Object, Graph, and then where it says Data. I can re-pull open with my graph selected that section, right? Let's say the client's like, hey, we got to change something here. We were wrong. It's 65% students who love class, but it's 15, or let's say 25% of students who like class, okay? I can live edit the graph, right? And life is good. Thank goodness, okay? So that's cool. Now, luckily, it didn't get lower on the 10%, otherwise we would have been in trouble. But now that that's set in stone, let's say the client has said, hey, it's all good, that's the accurate final data, I can close that graph window, and now I'm going to go up to where it says Object, and then Ungroup, okay? When I ungroup, I get this little pop-up that says, hey, after you've ungrouped the graphic, you can't change the way you did it before, but this will allow me to have more design control over this. The way I remedy this is before I ungroup, I just grab the whole chart and then make a duplicate and put it off to the side. And keep it for later, just in case the client needs to change something again. I just have a backup functioning chart for later. Okay. when it comes time to finish the project, no problem, I can erase it. But now I'm going to go to Object, Ungroup, and now I can say OK, which will allow me to edit this. And I'm going to scale this pie chart up. And by doing so, I can get a little bit more breathable open space inside of that red zone. Okay, not perfect yet, but better. All right, so scale is a great way to sort of solve that issue. All right, potentially, if this was too small, I could do external labeling, but notice I have to change the color of the type so that it stands out. I have to maybe draw a line, okay, that connects it to that specific piece. All right, and it sort of gets a little dicey. All right, so remember, we want data to be accessed equally. Now, one last thing I like to do with these kinds of charts is don't let them just be pie charts. So I'm going to click on this little piece of the pie and this piece of the pie, or sorry, rather, let's click on this piece of the pie and our type. I'm just going to grab these and pull them out. This is called a broken pie chart. It's not anything new or unique. It's just a little bit more interesting than showing everything as a pie, okay? Because it's like Microsoft PowerPoint and Word makes these charts, so anybody can do it. What are we going to do to make it more interesting as designers? Okay, so that's just one sort of simple thing to get started. I'm going to get that type centered. I always like my type centered inside of pie charts. Okay, life is good. All right. But, ladies and gentlemen, alas, this is still a pie chart. Okay, so we're going to try something else here. Luckily, I still have my alternative pie chart here, my backup. I'm going to make another backup because we're going to use the data that we made, that we used previously to edit this. Okay, so watch what we're going to do with this now. We're going to choose the graph, go up to where it says Object, Graph, Data. Open up our data set again. Okay, there's a little feature in here that lets us what's called traverse the column, okay, or traverse the data from a row into a column. So this is our row of data, which makes a pie chart. But if we click this little button right here, or sorry, transpose, if we transpose it into a column, what this means is now we get something called a bubble chart, okay? So it's made 3 bubbles, or 3 circles that are proportionately representative of the percentages, okay? A bubble chart is a great alternative to showing percentages, right? Which, as we said, is the most common form, or one of the most common forms of data represented. And again, all we needed to do is make these accurate circles, which is fantastic. Okay, now you can do more. It doesn't have to be always adding up to 100%. Like on a survey, for example, you may have several percentages. So these could be a great way to show the percentage that way over an array of different categories that need to be visualized. But in our case, we're going to still stay with the 3. So this is great, okay? And I don't need to break these so much away from like before with the pie chart where I have to separate it in order to do some tweaking, okay? These are really circles, all right? But alas, we have our same design issue, and now we have it twice. We can't even see the information inside of the circle, all right? So we are, sorry, unfortunately going to have to do Object, Ungroup, and then break the graph, okay? And then we can scale up these circles to now hold our type. I think this is going to be much better now. And then we can play with colors to make sure that we re-achieve our original RGB color scheme. Okay, so we have the same problem here. But again, using scale is going to be a great way to solve that. Okay, now I'm scaling the graph. Obviously, you could scale the type if you wanted to. Okay. Another alternative is that you could use different type. Like there might be more like pixel-based type or Gothic or grotesque type that's really, or condensed would be a better word, more common word, to show type that's taller, okay, and longer. I like to use a font face called, let's pull it open here, Steelfish. Okay, Steelfish is a free font that you can get on the internet. It's an open source font. Okay, and as you can see, it's a lot more condensed. A little tougher to read now, though, but allows us to show more information in a single space. So now 11 point, which was tiny before, I can increase that, and then I can open up my leading. I'm holding the Option key and I'm hitting the down arrow with all of these selected, and that is going to open up my leading. All right, might be a little bit too big still. Okay, So that's just another way. It's a stylistic point, but it's also a way to show off or to show how you can use different typefaces. I'm going to increase or open up the kerning here, where you can show data, specifically text, inside of a graphic in a much better way. Okay, it's just an alternative. All right, it's not something that's set in stone. I'm going to back up here though for a second. Wow, through the journey of kerning and leading, back to just Myriad Pro. Okay, because now what we want to add, because this is now working, is we want to get this back to our original color scheme. That's going to stay green. Oop, we actually got to fix something here because these stats are different. Students who hate class is the smaller one, and then students who love is the biggest one, and students who like is the mediocre one, okay, or in the middle. All right. So that'll stay green. This will now go to blue, and then this will go to red. Okay, so quickly at a glance we can see, most students love class. Wonderful. Okay, and again, no claims here on color psychology. You might want to think that red is representative of love. Okay, so now what we're going to finish off by doing is adding the percentages. So I'm going to do another drag copy by holding the Option key and clicking on Type, and I'm going to say that this is 65%. Okay, and I'm going to scale this up, center scale, by holding the Option and Shift key. All right, and that looks good. You always want your numbers to pop off the page, right? Let your numbers and the visuals be what it is. The labels, they can sort of fall a little bit, but in the hierarchy. But in this case, let numbers pop. Okay, so this may work well. Let's see, just quickly, I'm going to do a test. Okay, it works in that circle as well. Not so much here. All right, so here's a nice little trick that will help you solve this design problem. All right, so let's just get our accurate data. We said that that was 25%, and then that was 15%. Okay, just going to kern those a little bit tighter between the 2 and the 5 and the 1 and the 5. All right, this is a little trick I like to do. Percents are great, but we don't need to see the percent sign as huge and as bold and as big and as in our face. So what we're going to do is I'm going to scale down the percent sign. Right, it's rather huge. I'm going to make it as tall, well, a little smaller than the X height of the type. Okay, so I did that by just shrinking it, having it selected, and then I'm going to use this baseline shift option inside of the character palette, and I'm going to lift it up so that it sort of looks like 65 to the, sort of exponent, but we're going to put the percent sign there. Now what this does is it's a stylistic choice, but it does make something easier in terms of solving a design issue of, look at that big old percent sign. Okay, so in the case of the 15, we need it there. Okay, not in the 65 and the 25, but certainly in the students who hate class. We don't want to make them any more angrier than they already are. So what I'm going to do now is, rather than recreate that, is I'm going to select the percent again, copy it, and then I can paste it, and the formatting will remain. Boom, look at that. Okay, design issue solved. It's still a little tight for my taste, but it definitely makes life much easier. Okay, so there we have it. There is our bubble chart, and we can quickly and easily, through color and size of graphic, see the data, and then we can see the numbers and then the label. Okay, and that is a great way to make this information accessible. Let me just tighten that up here real quick. If you're very much interested in making this very sort of formulaic, you can make one formatting section, and then you can just sort of copy these over and then replace them with the others. Okay, I did them individually, but if you're more comfortable doing it the other way, that's cool too. One last thing I want to do here before we end is, I don't always love flat color. So in the swatches palette, if you pull open the little file navigator here, I'm going to pull open this gradients palette, which I already have open. It's called gradients and then brights. Okay, and you can see I have it open right here. This is a nice little touch that you can add to your charts to just make them look a little bit more interesting. Right? They have lighting and shading, those sorts of things. So when you use brights, it's still that same poppy color palette, but now watch this. I can add a little bit of dimension to it. Okay, so I always like to do a light to dark gradient, so it looks like there's a lighting scheme going on. Just so happens that there's that same blue. Ooh, love it. There we go. And then lastly here, for our haters, There is the red. Okay, and there you have it, guys. Nice little ways to just sort of set up some basic percentages. Okay, as I said again, percentages are, if not one of the most common pieces of data that you will represent. In this case, we're going up to 100, but you don't always have the opportunity to do 100s. 100, you may have other types of percentages, but this allows us to show data in a transparent and fun and accessible way. And this can become a part of something, right? I mean, we could do what Edward Tufte says to not do. We can create chart junk, right? We could make these into little balloons, right? By adding little pieces of sort of, I guess the tie-up part of the balloon, and then adding a little string. Okay. Now, Edward Tufte, the godfather of data visualization, says that this is absolutely something to not do, but sorry to say it, but folks need these sorts of things. They need these metaphors to connect. So if we can dress up the chart or junk it up, as he says, this may create a little bit of fun, a little bit of a new way to interpret or filter the information that allows us to connect to it on a more visceral level. This can help us reach more audiences and the less visually literate, and really sort of widen the range of how infographics connect to people. So anyway, guys, this is Mike Worth, and this is our tutorial on getting started with charts in Illustrator. Next tutorial coming up is going to be how we can make some handmade charts, right? Some things that we can do just by hand. And I'm going to take you through those steps. Thank you very much.